Hello and welcome to BusyWorksBeats.com. If you're like me, Logic Pro's piano roll is a little daunting coming from FL Studio, which is known for its piano roll. And trying to learn that workflow, you may get overwhelmed. Well, this video is to guide you step by step and from a beginner's perspective. I'm not a super pro at Logic Pro, so it makes it so that I can translate this information a lot easier. Let's hop straight into Logic Pro. So again, I don't claim to be an expert on everything Logic Pro. Firstly, what we're going to do here is click on our sound that we want to go to the piano roll with, if that's even the proper grammar. Okay, we're going to right click here, create a MIDI region, and let's make it like 8 bars or so. We're going to double click in here to open up the piano roll. Okay, so the piano roll, what I'd recommend you guys do is make this full screen. So just left click the edges and make it bigger, as big as you can make it, because the bigger the better with piano roll stuff. Let's zoom all the way back to the beginning here, just using our swirl. And by default, what I like to do is set these selectors here on the left side. This is when you left click. So for example, this is set to a select tool because I usually play by hand, so I need to select faster than I need to do anything else in the piano roll. I have mine set to selector tool or pointer tool. And on the right side, you can set this to a paintbrush. If you're familiar in FL Studio, you can left click and drag, or the pencil tool, which adds one note at a time. You know, I don't know which one's better, but let's just start with the brush tool. Okay, and what we want to do is, in order to activate that, we have to hit Control and then left click, because my normal left click is just a selector. So to make a note, we're going to hit Control and left click. So let's make this note long. So for example, we're going to make this note longer. We want to make chords. Okay, let's turn the metronome on up here, and let's hit Shift Alt and use our arrow key to make this note longer. Okay, now when I want to duplicate this note, I'm going to hit Alt left click or Option left click, and then drag this second note up here. You have to make sure you hold Option before you let go of that left click. And let's make a chord. Now, the only thing is here in Logic Pro, you do need to know music theory because they don't show you the note values per note, at least on the keyboard. So one way to kind of help you guys is if you go to View, let's select the note labels here, and this will show you the notes of each note. Now, again, it'd be even more supreme if they would add this value to the actual keys so you can quickly know where you're at and where you're trying to go. That does make a huge difference when you click in notes and you produce sideways. You can't look at the keyboard this way. You have to look at it sideways. Anyhow, so we're going to make a chord here. This is going to be a major 7th chord, a major 7th chord. So let's do this, and let's add another note here. We're going to add this note B, and we're going to hit Shift Alt and then use that arrow to make it longer. Now we could have used Option left click, but that's another way to do it. Now what we're going to do is spice this chord up a little bit. Let's take this note and so here's what it sounds like. Firstly, let's go all the way back. So it sounds cool, but we want to spice it up. So what we want to do is take this third, pull it up an octave. We can hit Shift Alt and then up or down to pull this note up an octave. So we're going to add that note up an octave, and we're also going to pull it down an octave. So I'm hitting Alt left click and then have the original position here. And I forgot to hold Alt, so that's my mistake. Alt or Option, left click, pull it down. Make sure you hold Option or that won't work. And I even more full chord. So let's say I want to transpose this entire chord. Let's hit Control A, Shift Alt down. Now we're in the more gritty zone for this chord. Okay, let's loop just this first bar. All right, now if we wanted to, take this further, we could get into more voicing styles, but all that's music theory and ease. So now you guys understand how to, add notes to the piano roll. You know how to actually elongate the notes. Let's copy this chord. So let's show you guys how to duplicate. So because this chord is a perfect length, meaning it ends right at that bar, we can simply hit Command R. So let's highlight all this, hit Command R, and it will duplicate perfectly. Now the thing is, I just want to warn you guys, if your notes are like even a hair off of that grid, let me just show you what it does. So if I hit Command R, it will latch paste. So see how that F is not lined up to the E right here? See if I can make this bigger for you guys. You see how this is not perfectly pasted? So if you latch paste without having a perfect length, it will offset. So be very, very careful that your stuff is perfectly length if you plan to use Command R. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Just a fair warning for the noobs out there who may not understand that, because your whole beat could be offset. You're like, why don't my drums line up? Okay, now we want to change something about the second chord. So let's say we want to go from C to maybe a dominant chord. So let's do 0. I'm getting into the weeds, but I teach a chord code system at busyworksbeats.com/music theory, and it's based on number. So I'm going to transform this chord to what's called a dominant ninth chord with an altered version of it. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're going to take this note B, hit Alt down. This transposes note by note. Okay, so that's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So we need to bring E down to here. So let's hit Alt down twice. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Now what I want to do here is create what's called an alternative or an altered chord, pardon me. So let's say I want to select multiple notes. Let's click on one note, the 5th in this case, and then the 9th. Let's hit Shift and left click. So now I've selected 2 notes. We're going to both raise these 1 semitone. So let's hit Option up. So we're transposing this up. And now we have what's called a dominant chord. And now let's say I like the chord type, but I want to transpose it to a different chord. So instead of C, I want this to be like maybe G. So let's highlight the entire chord here. Just select this, hit Alt up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now we have the chord that we want. So the only problem I have right now is everything's like, and it doesn't match like the vibe. So let's highlight all these notes and let's lower what's called the velocity on the left side. This will lower the intensity of how the notes are played. And it's such a low volume, I'm going to turn up what's called the channel rack here, just so you guys can hear it. Now, velocity is more than volume. It's the way that the sound is actually articulated. Without boring you guys to tears, what I'm going to do is go to the E piano itself and make sure the output gain is a pretty, high, so you can hear it. So it's not like, now it's like very soft. Even going to add an effect here. Let's add some chorus. Now we have like a dreamy sound here. And that's what we want for R&B. So let's double click to go back to the piano roll. And then my ear wants to hear. So let's find that note. So now we got to figure out what chord would have B on the top. I guess we could do the same exact chord. Let's highlight this chord C. Just highlight it, hit Command C or Control C. We're going to click the playhead over here. Just click here and hit Control V to paste. I'm going to pull this up an octave, hit Shift Option up, and let's see what this sounds. Now I want these notes more spread out. I'm not sure Logic has a built-in strum tool like in FL Studio, but again, I don't know everything about Logic yet. All right, so this sounds like a cool chord progression, but it still sounds very like robotic in a way. Now there's other things beyond just the piano roll that we could cover, but let's hit Control A and let's add a function here called the MIDI transform function. And let's go to where it says Humanize. So Humanize is a way to make our, played in notes sound a little more human, especially for people who don't have MIDI controllers. This interface is not the most simple, so I'm not going to sit here and make this up. Even as a pro, I'm like, what am I looking at? So let's see here. We could set, it says select events by condition. So this is an if then or an if filter. And then this is operations on selected events. So basically this is helping us filter down what we want to target up top. And then this is saying, what do we want to do with the thing that we're targeting? So I'll just say all the notes selected are fine. So we're not filtering any of the notes. Now down here, it's saying, what do we want to do? So we want a random, and then we want to, I don't know the maths here. So don't get me to doing math. I don't know. And let's just assume that it's targeting the velocity here. And let's see what this does. Select and operate. All right, so it looks like it worked because now when I look at the notes, they're all different numbers. Okay, so all these little numbers next to the note determine what's called the velocity. So before it was at 32 for every single note. Now it's at various numbers. Now it sounds a little more human. So this last one's a little soft, so I'm going to grab this entire velocity, and now I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see the number to the right. This is how hard I'm hitting the note. So let's pull this velocity up, and as you can see, it scales each velocity per the note. As a group, I should say. And then we could drag this note out manually or hit Shift Alt and use our arrows to drag that out. All right, so that's how I use the piano roll for things like the chords or the piano. Now let's get into the piano roll in terms of the 808, which is a whole different beast. Let's turn our metronome on for this one. And let's right click here for our 808, create a MIDI region, double click. And we want to follow what we did before. So it was the chords C, G, and C. You don't need to memorize all the music theory. Okay. So now we need to go to our actual 808. Make sure we're in that piano roll view. Make sure, bang. Okay, just click in here. So now we have the 808 view. And it tells you the root note. So this will trigger the sample by default. You know, if I pitch it up or down, it will sound like either faster or slower, basically. So let's just start with the root note here. Let's hit Command, left click. So I want to go boom, 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 boom. Okay, so I didn't hear the 808 at first because the velocity was low. So we need to highlight this and turn the velocity up. I recommend keeping it somewhere around like 70. You know, that's usually the default is like 70, I believe. So start there. But if it's too quiet, you guys can try turning up the velocity, especially with one-shot samples. Velocity is more of a gain than it is triggering different articulations. Long story short, think of it like a volume knob when it comes to things like your drums. So I'm just going to turn this up. Okay, so let's hit Control and just left click in here. Now in Logic, this is different than FL Studio. So by default, this is set to truncate the notes. Whereas in FL Studio, you know, its default is it lets the note ring out. So that's why some people say the drums don't hit the same. It's simply because the notes aren't elongated. So in Logic, it's not like FL Studio where if you overlap the notes, it just gets crazy. You can just highlight these, hit Shift Alt, and then use that right arrow to make these longer. And it won't overlap like in FL. Well, it is technically overlapping, but let me see if there's a function I could show you guys here. All right, so we're just going to assume these don't overlap. This is an 808, so it depends on the length of your 808 as well. This is a very short 808, so it's not going to overlap regardless. But this step, you know, technically these are overlapping, so just understand that. I guess worst case scenario, you guys got highlighted. If you're super paranoid, click here, go to Scissor tool, and then hit your command on your keyboard. Just got to figure out where this note actually hit. So it's actually not that easy to do this. Hit Control and then just cut it here and delete. If you're paranoid that the 808 will overlap, you guys could do that step. I'm sure there's a faster shortcut somewhere on the internet. Again, we're not super pros yet. But again, my perspective that I'm giving you guys is more from like if you just got into Logic Pro. So this is a fresh, like you're trying to figure it out type of mindset that I have. Okay, so let's add some more 808s in here. Okay, so really simple. Doom, doom. Okay, we could change our snap to grid too to like 1/16 or 1/8, so we're not just dragging them in between the notes. Okay, so we're gonna keep the 808 simple. We're not trying to make the hardest beat right now. I'm just trying to show you guys simple functions here. Now again, to go back to your arrangement area, we're going to highlight this, hit Command R. The reason we can hit Command R is because this pattern or the MIDI region perfectly goes out to the bar. So we could hit Command R and it won't like have a weird offset time. So again, we're not trying to make the next smash hit right now. All right, let's go to the hi-hats and let me show you guys a different workflow for the hi-hats. Now, I don't do my hi-hats in the actual piano roll, but if you guys wanted to, I'm pretty sure you can think of a way to do it. So let me go to my hi-hats here. Let's right click, create a region for just the hi-hats, not the hi-hat and the snare. So most people, they'll go to the group track, which is this one. Technically, this is the group track. I'll rename it for you guys. So drum kit. Most people will right click here, go to MIDI, create a MIDI region and double click. But the issue here is that this is only set to 2 values, or you know, however many pads you guys have on your actual drum machine. And with modern trap, you want to do different pitches with your hi-hat. Sometimes you want to do hi-hat rolls and all this type of stuff. So you can do that in the step sequencer, but I'll show you guys, we're not going to set up the MIDI region on the drum kit. We're going to set it up on the hi-hat. So we have to go to the specific hi-hat, right click and add that region here. Now we could double click in here. And here's where that brush tool comes in handy, because now we could just we could click on the brush tool, and now we could just hit, I like my snap to grid on 1/16. We could hit control and then left click and drag. I don't do my hi-hats this way, but this is one way you guys could do hi-hats. Okay, so I'm showing you this way because now you can do the hi-hat glitches. Like if you change your snap to grid to 1/32 in this case, because we're at 120 BPM, you could highlight it up here. Let's make this smaller. Okay, so you could left click to drag the snap length, hit control. Let me just duplicate it. Might be easier. Delete that thing. Let's highlight this. Wonder why it doesn't save the actual length. It's kind of strange. But again, there's probably a setting, I don't know. So let's just hit Command R to duplicate. So now it goes like that. So that's how some people do their trap hi-hats. Some people, I don't, it depends on. Turn this down. And then we can always go back to the actual drum kit and then go to where it says step sequencer. If you hit this edit tool, go to where it says step sequencer. And this is a little outside of the scope because we're talking about the step sequencer, but I like mine set to 64 steps. And we'll just draw in the snare. Actually, we don't really even need it. The snare is very repetitive, but normally I'll put it on 64. I'll do 16 for now because it's just a snare. Okay, but normally I have that on 64 steps. Now we have like a trap R&B vibe. Again, we're not trying to make the hardest beat right now. All right. One thing I don't remember I covered is Quantize. So if you're recording stuff by hand, and let's say it's just off by like that much, you can hit Q to quantize it. And the quantize is on the left side of the piano roll. So this is your snap to grid for the quantize. And if you have a smaller number, it basically will think of your stuff as very chunky. If you have a bigger number, like 1/16, it will think of your stuff as very granular. So the bigger the number, the more granular. The smaller the number, like 1/2, the more chunky it's going to lock into the grid. Okay, if that makes sense. So that's that. And you could adjust the swing for different vibes, like especially if you're doing hip hop, swing might be included for your style of music. They also have a scale lock. Now, I'm telling you stuff that I would use as a producer. I don't use this because R&B, as I showed you guys, we're going out of key on purpose. Now, if I start scale locking, it's going to pull us back in key, which is actually going to ruin the whole neo soul vibe. So by default, let's change the root note here to C because that's where we started. We made a C major 7th chord. So we're in the key of C major. But if I quantize, all these notes, if I hit Control A and quantize the notes, it takes away the whole going out of key thing. And it just kind of kills the vibe. So I don't normally use scale quantize. I could see this being used for people who improv very quickly and they need to be in key. I'm going to exaggerate this big time, but let's see what I can kind of generate. Okay, so again, this is not to be the greatest thing ever. We're just trying to test this feature. So what I'm going to do is record on the piano and just do like random stuff. But my goal here is to quantize it back into the scale so that it doesn't feel like I'm playing random notes out of key. So I'll purposely play out of key a couple times. So let's record this in. So I just played a bunch of random notes. Let's highlight all these notes. Now they're very, very loud. Okay, so let's turn the velocity down because that is really loud. All right, this one's at 93. Let's turn that down. Okay, so I don't know why it says 1. I'm not sure which one. Anyhow, that's arbitrary. What I'm going to do now is use that scale lock because a couple of the notes, like right here, even though it did sound good the way I played it, but But let's say you didn't play with the finesse like I just did. Let's hit quantize on the scale, and now I took those notes, the black notes, and it quantized it to the white notes in this case. But we did lose some of that bluesy sound. Again, this is why this note almost feels perfect that it's out of key. So that's why I'm like, you know, some stuff I'll use, but some stuff I actually won't use. It's cool to have there, maybe for like 808s if you're quickly playing the 808 and you're like, oh, I'm out of key, and then you quantize it. I can see that being a use case, but normally I don't mess with that. So I'm being honest with you guys. There's only one more feature that I didn't cover, so let me pull up a plugin real quick. Okay, so there's one cool feature in Logic Pro that you don't see in any other DAW, at least from what I've used the DAWs to do. So in this one, we have what are called different articulations. Articulations are ways you can play an instrument. So here's the default, which is called the sustain articulation. But let's say I want to play more rhythmic. These are just different ways to play the same instrument. Okay, so what I can do is actually, let's go from sustained. I can double click to go to the piano roll. We have to hit Control A to select the MIDI notes here. And then I could right click and then go to where it says articulation. And I could actually switch the articulation for all these notes. So let's do a spiccato instead. So it's more of a short note. And I could change the articulations. This is really good for guitar stuff too. Or we want to do a trill, let's say. So this is a whole step versus the other one is a half step. We could also do tremolo, which is just a rhythmic playing style. Okay, so this is a way to test out different expressions for the same chord notes. So that's the last feature I'll cover. Again, the beat is just, you know, it is what it is, but that is how I use the piano roll in Logic Pro. So hopefully it made it easy for you guys. Share with a friend who needs help in Logic Pro. Peace out, guys.